mitigate risks, not enough to just know that those things are happening. We do need to plan ahead to mitigate them to the extent possible. And then we're providing and we're promoting informational resources pre-trip. That's for students, faculty, and staff. And then importantly, we on our side are documenting that we did those 4 steps. Everyone documents this a little bit differently. Some people really just rely on informal means like emails and notes from meetings. Some people choose to have signatures on things. And I think that really just kind of depends on the fit for your organization and your culture. And then finally, number 6, sad reality here is that even when you do 1 through 5, things are going to happen. All of us here know that in life, especially people who are parents or grandparents. You can be the most prepared and have the highest desire to protect, someone. And if you can't do that for your kids, you definitely can't do it for every student, every employee, every faculty, every staff member. It's just an unfortunate reality. So we do need to be, really focused on 1 through 5, but also prepared to respond really well. That's a really important aspect of meeting our duty of care. And again, that infrastructure for response looks really different for every university, kind of depending on their operations and their needs, but it is standard. That's a really important piece. I want to just highlight a few things that I also, would provide as just kind of a pointer, kind of a place to get started if you're thinking, okay, I really do want to meet my duty of care. These are a few documents that I have found probably to fall under the community standard definition at this point. Organizations and universities have internal facing documents, they have external facing documents. So the internal facing document is a really strong crisis response plan. And probably it's something that you are operationalizing and practicing with once a year, because it's no good if it just sits in a closet. And then very important also is those external facing documents that are making sure that the people you work with and the students that you support have access to information and understand how they will be supported in case an incident does occur. And also importantly, how to inform you that an incident has occurred, kind of kick off that process. So a safety and security policy, kind of an overarching standalone document, is supported by travel protocols that are based on a specific population type, because an undergraduate heading out on a study abroad year probably has really different travel protocols than, if your provost is going to Chicago for a meeting for a week. So we want to take that into account. And then finally, those are kind of underpinned by some geographic specific information about risks and mitigation measures that have really clear directives for travelers. I think too often we provide just kind of background information about a geographic region, and we don't call out exactly what we're asking you to do to mitigate these up at the top of the document. So I'm going to wrap up here with kind of a note about getting outside support for that, because I think sometimes we talk about that, it sounds like a lot, and I understand because I've been there. I've had to, build and maintain safety and security infrastructure myself, and I know that a lot of people doing this at universities aren't lucky enough to have a whole team of people that they're overseeing, that they're working with. They're kind of a one woman or one man show, and because of that, some universities rely on outside vendors in infrastructure because they've kind of realized, okay, I don't meet the community standard here, and that puts me, in a vulnerable place. And so I'm going to look outside of my internal infrastructure for some support here. And we work a lot with universities who are considering vendors and what that looks like to support their safety and security. And I can say that every situation is unique, but these are 3 kind of flags that we see a lot when we're supporting universities that we thought just might be helpful, to jot down or keep in your mind if you do at some point think that you need to contract with outside support. So it's finding the right fit, finding the exact services that actually help you address the weaknesses you identified, that aren't just duplicating things that you're fully capable of doing yourself. There are a lot of different options out there, and they provide a whole range of services at a whole range of prices. And I know that can be a little bit difficult to navigate, but it is always our goal, and it should be your goal too, to not pay for things that you don't need. 2, the relationship between vendor and insurance policies. I speak from very personal experience that can be very difficult to parse out. You want to understand the nuance of who is providing or, helping to find and locate and arranging care or transportation, and then who's actually paying for that. And it's not always clear even to the people who manage these policies, let alone, students and faculty that rely upon them. So you really, really want to parse that out while you're kind of undergoing this process. And then finally, the logistics of the contractual operations that you do agree to. It looks like just a bunch of writing. This is what we're going to do, this, and I think it's really easy to gloss over, but they have serious real life implications. Do you want your manager's manager to get a phone call from a vendor at 3 a.m.? You don't. That's probably going to have really personal ramifications for you and for your position and your reputation. And so we are always working with clients. There almost always is a change, when we talk through this. And so I would just really encourage you, as you're looking at these contracts, to play this out completely. How do you want to be communicated with, and when and at what time? Are you okay receiving calls at 2 a.m? You might be. I've been that person. Sometimes it just has to be you because that's the most efficient. And sometimes it's not you because you don't have the ability to say yes or no to that coverage and that plan, that plan for like assistance for your student. And so maybe really it is your manager, and that's something you can bring up, proactively instead of reactively after they got a call at 2 a.m. So those are three things that we think are, really important that we just want to flag. And I'm actually wrapping up here. So I'm going to hand this back to George to continue through.
Thank you so much, Serena. There was a lot there. And so I want to encourage participants, please use the question and answer feature of Zoom if you'd like to ask Serena to elaborate on anything or you have some additional questions for her. But as we progress through our presentation today, next we're going to be hearing from Mike Beatty with San Francisco State University, where he is a risk manager. And so I'm going to pull up his slides. And Mike, thank you so much. We're eager to hear from you.
Great. Thank you, George. And Serena, I am comfortable taking that 2 a.m. call as the campus risk manager. That's a fantastic point. I've been at the university for 6 years now. Prior to that, I did 12 years as an insurance broker and risk management consultant for the California State University. So that's 450,000 students sprinkled about 23 campuses. So I was able to learn a lot about the insurance side and bring all that onto our one campus at San Francisco State. When I first came to campus, one of my initial projects was to go out and identify the risks among the campus community. Go out and meet with stakeholders in every department, to meet with leadership, and put together what we call a risk registry, identifying strategic risks, financial risks, et cetera. What floated to the top of that risk registry list was international travel. I partnered with our friends at Office of International Programs, engaged procurement, engaged legal counsel, all the significant stakeholders who need to be involved in international travel and especially international agreements. So the first slide I'm going to talk about is the international academic programming service providers we partner with. And then we're going to talk more about the insurance and the assistance component of it. So in meeting with procurement and legal counsel, we identified some significant changes to make to our internal program at San Francisco State. We implemented a process for considering new agreements, trying to identify if we really need to partner with this organization, because maybe we have another program that fits most of the needs of it and we don't need to go down that road. We developed a timeline for processing requests as well as a standard contract template. What this does is it allows for certainty among both staff and administrators who are working with these programs, but also with our partners, third-party vendors. We identified additional supplemental information that we needed, and not just the contract or the agreement, statement of work, which defines the programs and the university roles. This helps identify risks that may be there, as well as to drive accountability. Insurance requirements we'll get to later on, but somebody has to provide those, whether it's the provider or it's the university. We need a way to protect our students when they're traveling overseas, because we will get the call at 2 a.m. and it may be from a parent, it may be from a grandmother. And we want to make sure that we have all our ducks in a row in getting ready for those conversations. We want to ensure that the providers have an emergency management plan and a program handbook. We want to make sure they know what they're doing because we're putting our students in their care, custody, and control. The parents are not going to call the service provider. They're going to call us, say, what are you doing with this emergency? And we want to be able to have documentation to review and refer back to when we enter into these agreements. One thing we also want to have is a waiver process. Suppose you're dealing with a partner, academic partner, in a country for which insurance may not be as available as it is here, but they're a trusted, long-time, valued business partner. We want to find who we actually think is, or know through experience, is going to have all the steps, all the ducks in the road to protect our students. We want to be able to still allow those relationships to move forward, even if they're not able to meet the insurance requirements. Maybe we purchase it on their behalf because the program is so well received and so important to the strategic mission of the university. Next slide. Okay, we want to start with what's already there when we're talking about insurance. Does the university have insurance that's going to protect the travelers, or do we need the providers to cover that? As being one of the 23 campuses in the California state system, San Francisco is lucky to be able to piggyback on system-wide initiatives, which include a foreign travel insurance program for all faculty, staff, students, and volunteers traveling abroad on university business. That allows us the comfort of knowing that these travelers are going to be adequately protected through our program. The Chancellor's office mandated this coverage for all international travelers about 10 years ago. So it's a very well-developed, robust insurance program. We've added bells and whistles when we've needed to. But for your organizations, you want to define the minimum insurance coverages. I mean, you want primary accident or sickness benefit, so that if your traveler gets sick or get injured, they can go to the hospital and get that taken care of. We want to be able to evacuate them in a medical emergency, as well as in a security situation where we may need to go in and extract our students, our travelers from a foreign country. AD&D is one of those insurance terms that often, makes me blush sometimes, just accidental death and dismemberment. It's no fun to talk about, but the coverage is there. Some additional benefits you might want to consider with your insurance partner is general liability. So if your traveler causes damage or injury to a third party while on their study abroad program overseas, you want your insurance policy to be able to cover them for expenses related to that sort of litigation. Auto liability, if you have a researcher who needs to drive on university business in a different country, you want to make sure that they're adequately protected if they crash into something or someone. One of the bells and whistles that the university was able to put together was emergency reunion. And what this does is if one of your travelers is hospitalized, it pays for the expenses incurred by one family member to fly from the United States to go and be with them. It includes their airfare as well as hotel accommodations, so they can be there in the traveler's time of needs. This is one of those above and beyond opportunities to really provide assistance to parents who are in a bad situation. Trip cancellation, interruption, and delay, we all know what those are. So those are also really good add-ons to any insurance coverages you're looking at. Next slide. When you're accessing assistance, cross-pollination, you want to make sure that your insurance provider and your security or assistance provider, that they, what I like to say, play well in the sandbox. You want them, a lot of these coverages are all put together. You buy the insurance and it also comes with a security or assistance component. You want to make sure that those two organizations are talking to each other and they understand what each other is responsible for. Because the last thing you want to know, you want to see at the end of the day is those organizations pointing at each other saying, no, it's your job. No, it's your job. No, 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 because it ultimately will fall on the campus or the organization to help solve that. And that's the last thing you want to do in a situation like this. Things we look for from travel assistance providers. You want a pre-travel training. You want a lot of information, like Serena mentioned. You want to give information to the travelers before they go abroad, so they're aware of the risks that they're entering into. Students, they may have never been abroad outside of the country or outside of the country without their parents. They need to know basic things about how to be safe when walking around a crowded neighborhood in a foreign country. They want to know where the embassy is, who to contact for assistance, real-time assistance. Traveler tracking capabilities. Now that's something I should have worded differently because we're not tracking our travelers all the time. But what we want to be able to do is to send them a push notification and say, hey, there's some security problems in your area. Can you click this button and tell me you're okay, or if you need assistance? So it's like one-time tracking, but it's also with the student's permission. We're not just tracking them, monitoring, Big Brother the whole time while they're over there. Emergency notification or checking capabilities, just referred to. And you want region-specific travel advice. You just don't want, oh, things are safe in country X. You want to know what region the student or the traveler is going to. You also can even drill down to, these capabilities go down to the neighborhood where they're lodging is. What's the security scene like there? Remote support, medical assistance. You want your assistance provider to also be able to evacuate and repatriate when necessary. Next slide. Some things you also want to consider is negotiations with your insurance or assistance provider. You want these relationships to be relationships. You don't want to reach out to them only on the renewal time, when the program renews. You want to have relationships, discussions with them, and talk to them as they throughout the whole year, because it's building relationships that allows you to make changes to the coverages you might have and to address any coverages that the insurance program might want to incorporate. For instance, when COVID hit in last March, we had thousands of students abroad. The CSU issued a mandate that all study abroad students return home. We were able to get the insurance provider and part of our self-insurance program to actually pay the extra expenses incurred by the students coming home. That would be, you had to book a travel ticket, book a plane ticket right away. Or, you had signed a semester-long lease and you had to leave it after 2 months. We were able to get those costs paid by the insurance and our self-insurance component to the tune of about $300,000 last March throughout the system in 23 campuses. But upon policy renewal on July 1st, they said, that's it. We're not doing that anymore. You have to let your students know that they're accepting the risks when they go and study abroad during COVID. And so with that comes then the need to actually give the information to the students so they can make informed decisions. We need to let them know that, number one, you're traveling during a pandemic. A lot of these expenses are not going to be paid if something should happen, and the university needs to pull you back again. We want to define the roles of the provider and the institution. Like I said, not all universities have the resources like the California State University where we can purchase this or negotiate the best terms and rates for this large foreign travel insurance program we have. But if not, you can also farm it out to the provider. But ideally, the university is going to be the person who the parent, who the student reaches out to. So you need to make sure that you've done your best effort to protect them the best way that you can. Understand the resources, the providers, and your resources, because it needs to change a long time. Now what we do when students go abroad is we've developed a COVID-19 risk assessment. So we have a matrix with about 10 different data points that we update weekly to identify what countries we allow students to go forward to. That includes vaccination rate, hospital bed availability, CDC's, the Department of State travel rate ranking. So those are the things that are brought into our assessment to determine whether OIP and risk management and collaboration approve a country for travel to. We also provide them with health and safety sheets. So every student traveling abroad gets a country-specific health and safety sheet outlining all the information that's captured in the assessment, it's been an effort of transparency, and also other common tips for getting around safely. We were able to actually upload those into our Origami portal. Bradley's coming up next, so I thought I'd give him a little chime in. So you upload these documents to Origami, and what happens then is the student downloads the contact card, number one, so they have all the information about your university and who to contact in an emergency. They also download a copy of the document. But the great thing is that we update the document weekly. When I put that on the portal, the traveler gets a notification saying, hey, updated information, grab this one instead of the other one. So there's a lot to talk about here. And I know it's been a fast-paced discussion. And I'm happy to take any questions either in the chat, or if you'd like to email me directly, I'm happy to do that as well. We have one more slide. Well, one other thing that we do is we track all our incidents and the responses. As you can see, the responses have the chart on the lower right of the number of students we had to reach out to in emergency situations. And so we use that data, we capture that, and we use that to bring to leadership, the CFO, and say, hey, listen, we're seeing a trend here, and we need additional resources to be able to adequately address the risks that we see with international travel.
No, perfect. Thank you so much, Mike. That's really insightful coming from the university perspective. You'll see there are some folks who've already started putting questions in the Q&A feature of Zoom. Please continue. We're going to have a chunk of time at the end to address those questions. Now, next and thank you so much, Mike, for your presentation. Next, we're going to hear from Bradley Adams with Aragami. I know Mike made a reference to Aragami already, so we're looking forward to hearing from Bradley. Are you able to take over the presentation?
Yep.
Okay, so I'll pass that baton.
Perfect. Can everyone see my screen here?
Yep, looks good.
Awesome. Well, thanks everyone for joining the webinar today. I'm excited to discuss some of the elements of duty of care that we've already talked about today. And thank you to the other panelists for doing such a great job getting this conversation started, because often when we work with universities to look at their duty of care fulfillment, these are a lot of the questions that we run into, is how do we go through and assess the different partners and providers to be a part of our journey of providing a safe experience for our students and being ready when things don't always turn out the way we want them to. And one of the big pieces I want to cover here today is accessibility. Because we can spend a lot of time and we can spend all the months negotiating contracts and resources and insurance benefits that will give our travelers the best chance at staying safe or being ready for that disaster when it occurs. But if they can't get to it, then the rest of the cycle kind of falls apart. And that's where we really think that we make a difference with what my organization, Origami, does when we work with our universities and their risk managers, like Mike mentioned. So one of the things to consider when we're putting together these resources, the first question we always ask is, what is the actual defined list of resources and services available to travelers if they're in a jam? So Mike and Serena covered some great ways to talk through assistance and insurance providers who have all these different benefits and perks that can help these travelers. But really coming down to a defined list for the population of students that we're mainly dealing with is really helpful for understanding how we can make this more available to them and put this information in locations that they'll actually find. I remember when I went abroad on my own journey, they were giving us paper wallet cards. But one of the big challenges, no one ever taught us how to dial an international phone number. And that can often be I'll say a risk enhancement, not a de-escalation like we want to go for. And so that's one of the questions that we often don't think about when we're trying to put these resources together, but are so critical when our students are in this foreign country, don't know who to call, and they're trying their best they can to use the resources that we provided for them. So what are those resources and services available to travelers? And then the question we ask is, how do they activate that support channel? Are they making a phone call? Are they logging into a web portal that the assistance provider is putting together for them so they can see the intelligence reports for their location? Do they have to download a mobile app ahead of their journey? These are all important things to understand prior to a student leaving, because as we know, once that pre-orientation ends and we have that one chance with the student to really give them all the information they need, it becomes very difficult to confirm that these students are in fact receiving the information and are actively looking at these resources that we're providing for them. So the next question, or the next step we'll go into, is where can we put this information? What's the location that all these great resources and services can live, so students have one spot they can go to when they are in trouble, and find the resource that's going to help them most in their specific location. And there's a whole bunch of different options. I know there are universities range in budgets and capabilities. Some have their own internal IT teams that can put together a really fancy web page. Others aren't so lucky, where you have one director who's doing everything. So what are some of the ways that we can put these resources into a location that's going to be easiest for the travelers to find? And so one of the things I want to take a moment to do today is just cover some of the options available, because when we work with universities through our work at Origami, one of the questions we always get is, this is great, we love the technology, but what if after COVID, we've just had a very hard budget year and we don't necessarily have the same resources that we're used to when it comes to putting together these different risk management resources? And there are a lot of great free tools out there that universities can use to organize this information, organize these services in a way that still remain accessible to students, especially through their mobile phone. Because as we know, students always have their mobile phone on them. And even as international services continue to expand, we're seeing trends of students more and more likely keeping their domestic devices and are using international SIM cards to help cover an international signal. So it's really important that they can access this information on a mobile device. And here you can see several options available. The one I always promote right away is just the Share Drive folder. Most campuses are either a Google campus or a Microsoft campus. And both those companies have great share folder applications already built that students are likely using for their regular management of their own school documents. And so it's very easy to put these different resources into one location that travelers can be shared on a folder, have a collection of the assistance resources, the insurance resources, the on-campus resources, and have all of that information in one location for them to activate. These services usually also offer an offline option, so they can manage and look at the document offline, which is really great if you are not sure of what kind of self-service or what kind of signals that students will be getting at their various locations. So just a really great flexible option. And in most cases, it's free. So there's really no limitations of budget. It's really just more of a sweat equity that you want to put in there. Some of the other options below are a little bit more advanced. I already mentioned websites before. This can be difficult if a university doesn't have any IT support or has to go out and seek IT resources. It can just be a lengthy process, and it can sometimes be a half-baked product, so to speak. So you might not always get exactly what you're looking for, depending on how those resources work within your university. But certainly a really great option still, though, because a web link can be saved for a student. They can go to that web page, and similar to my own situation where I had a hard time dialing that international phone number, web pages and some of these more digital modes of getting this information to travelers usually allow them to take action right from their device. So they don't have to even know how to dial an international phone number. They can just click the link, have it activated, and be off to the resource they need. Another one that's very popular in the university space are mobile apps. A lot of providers will include these in their packages, so something to consider when you're going through the contracts and discussing different benefits and other technologies available to your university with this contract. And mobile apps offer a lot of great functionality. They have plenty of features that students can use to stay safe. A lot of them have location tracking in more of a big brother sense, but that it depends on the university's strategy for their risk management. But one of the things that's kind of a drawback with the mobile apps is they're usually pretty expensive, so they require that budget to bring to the travelers. And from what we've seen with our own universities, as they've switched from a mobile app to an application like ours, is the engagement's not always there with travelers. So just something to consider, because like Serena said, there is this moral obligation of duty of care. And one of the things that's not great for, I would say, a moral understanding is kind of the good enough mentality of, hey, we have this resource in place. Whether or not students are using it is besides the point. We have it. And sometimes that kind of thinking is what gets students into situations that could have been avoided if someone just simply asked the question, hey, can we do better? Is there somewhere in this system that's not working for us? And if you're seeing a mobile app rate only getting 5% of downloads from your 100 students, what we see is that can create a fake safety net for universities. And that's the last thing you want in any type of risk scenario. The last one's a paper packet. Simple, easy, print it out, send it with travelers. Very simple tool to get out there. But again, you run into challenges of training and making sure students know how to use the resources And ultimately, many of the times it's lost by travelers or it's put in a drawer somewhere. And, the last place that a student usually is during a risk scenario is in the library. So we want to make sure that they have access to that information at every point. And then the last one, I'll just talk about origami for a second here. Mike mentioned this before. We have a platform called DigiDoc that kind of combines the best of most of these tools here, where we provide that mobile accessibility for travelers in a simple and engaging format. And it makes it easy for risk managers like Mike to send them new information as it comes out and provide the key access points to those risk resources. So communication, moving on to the next piece of it. This is a really important element of the duty of care promise to our travelers, because how can we help keep them safe if we can't communicate with them? And this goes on both sides, whether it's preparation and preparing them during a pre-orientation or through the process of getting them ready for their journey, versus reacting to an emergency abroad. Something's happened and we need to communicate with our travelers. And so right here, I'm showing a graphic that was actually created by our cohort, the communication cohort during the GLI Institute. So shout out to communication cohort here for putting together this awesome infographic to help us organize our communication, because a crisis team is dealing with multiple stakeholders at any given point, not just with the third parties that we've talked about here, but like Mike described, there's also internal and external players involved here that we need to be aware of, whether it's a parent calling in to check in with your traveler, or whether it's a university executive who's coming in saying, where are our students? I just saw this clip on CNN and I know we have students there. So what's going on? Who's been reached out to? Who's checked in? And so on and so forth. And it's really important for a crisis team to understand the flow of these communications and how each situation will have varying players involved in each situation. So kind of like what Mike described earlier, where you end up with an assistance provider and insurance provider pointing at each other saying, hey, you're the one who's supposed to take care of it. Having a graph and having an organization structure like this clears up those disputes very quickly, because now a university has a documented place that says, hey, we ran the situation when we did the contracting and auditing phase. You said you would handle this one, and this would be the primary point of contact for this type of situation. So therefore, we expect you to handle this. And also internally for the crisis team, this is a great tool to understand how each individual person within the office also handles different types of situations. Because the last thing we want is having two people trying to do the same job, or adding confusion by over communicating to a certain party. And those types of mistakes just reduce people's confidence in the team to handle that type of crisis. So I know this will be included in a report later once the Institute is over. So if you guys like this graphic, I know it will be available there once we wrap everything up. So that's it. That's it from me. Thanks again, everyone. I'm happy to answer any questions about communication or accessibility. Our focus really is on the technology side of it. So I'm happy to answer any questions you might have about technology and how it plays a role within your duty of care fulfillment. Thanks, guys.
Great. Well, thank you so much, Bradley, and really to all of our panelists, Serena, Bradley, and Mike. Now, I've seen in a minute, I'm going to be working with Rosa, who has been managing the Q&A that's come in. And maybe I could ask Rosa right off the bat if she has any questions that she would like to facilitate with our panelists. Classic, she's unmuting. Here we go. Sorry about that, everybody. There we go.
Yes, sorry for that. Thank you to all of our speakers today. I do have some questions, but I wanted to tell everyone in the webinar today to feel free to add their own questions at the Q&A feature. And we could start with a question for Serena today. So Serena, you stressed the moral responsibility component of duty of care, something that Bradley also mentioned. Can you give some examples of what you mean by that?
Yeah, actually, I think when Bradley mentioned it, he encapsulated it pretty well, in that we find that a lot of universities, also true for INGOs, but here we're focusing on universities, that they know that when they and their managers managers go home at night, they're not sitting there in bed stressing out about, oh gosh, if I was in front of a judge, what legal standard would I use? They're thinking, man, I really care about this student. I really care about their families, and I want to do the best that I can for them. And so usually that means that even if there is a legal standard that you would, bring up to an attorney or something like that, that's not really where the focus is. And that's not really the conversation. And it's not really how we're going to frame it, because we don't think that's how you frame it. And so usually it means we're talking about going above and beyond a minimum. So, we look around to the community standards, and I see that, as kind of a minimum to say, yeah, I really do feel like I have a solid argument that we're meeting our duty of care. But what else? Is there something else? Okay. I mean, Bradley brought up a good example there. Okay, kids are on their app all the time. Why are we only getting 5% uptake of an app when we know kids are on their phone 24 hours a day right now? And so, great, we're going to be able to say that we have an app, but if we're at 5%, maybe we don't feel good enough about that. And I think that kind of extra step is actually what motivates most of us. So I'm not suggesting, that the moral piece is kind of this standalone extra consideration that we all should be really trying to analyze. I'm just saying that that's kind of the framing of the conversation, and that's what's going to be most useful for you too. How can we do the right thing for the students that we care about, the faculty, the staff that we work with? They're a really important part of our lives that we see day to day, because the reality is that we can have webinars like this, we can talk about duty of care. The reality is, you might be the person on the phone talking to a parent when their child is involved in a critical incident. And some of you probably have already even been in that. And I can tell you weren't thinking about, oh man, what is the legal standard that dictates, what I should have done here? So I'm just trying to acknowledge that reality more.
Well, that was a very good answer. Thank you so much, Serena. I completely agree with you that you don't think only in the legal implications, but in the moral, in that sense, the personal and humane. And a question for Mike. You mentioned supporting your trusted in-country partners, even if it means going as far as contracting the insurance coverage from the university. Has this situation happened to you, and were you able to work it through with your university's administration?
Well, it actually has not happened. What has happened is that we've assisted partners in identifying a market for them to access. And so, being a resource for our trusted partners, but I could see that those discussions were had. But we just we were able to direct the partner to an appropriate insurance company to be able to allow them to continue on with the relationship program building that we have.
Thank you so much, Mike. And in this sense, I have to jump in and say that sometimes, having lived from this side of being, abroad and working as an on-site person, sometimes, the insurance have these conditions that are hard to reach from outside. So, for example, the amounts that are required as a deposit, etc., are amounts that are, over what we normally have here. So, in that sense, I do appreciate the fact that you mentioned trusting your on-site partners. Yes.
And that's also an opportunity for us to implement the insurance waiver process that we have. So sometimes we will, again, reduce the limits like you referred to. Some countries may not have the $2 million per occurrence, and we can reduce that to a level that the university is comfortable with and the partner is able to provide.
Yes, I completely agree with that. And especially, the University of California system has that very high insurance levels. So yes, I appreciate you saying that. And well, thank you so much, Mike. And a question for Bradley. You mentioned several times, being in touch with what students or travelers you mentioned really use. And have you noticed also a change in that since the pandemic came over?
Yeah, absolutely. I think there's more of a focus on it than there ever was before. We're getting a lot of conversations with our university partners about how can we go a step further than we did before, kind of going back to Serena's point of the moral commitment to really fulfilling that duty of care promise for our travelers. And so we've seen our universities kind of go that next level and say, what more can we do to communicate? Are these pathways working? We know students don't really respond to emails all that well, although it's a great and easy and simple channel. What are some ways that we can expand those offerings? And that was actually one of the reasons why Origami also included WhatsApp as a new communication platform within our own messaging service, because we saw this new approach to communicating with travelers in a more effective and efficient manner. And one of the ways to do that is to meet them where they already are. And I think there was kind of a resistance to that before, just because, again, it just required asking that next question or going and finding that extra service, which sometimes can be a stretch too far for some offices who have smaller teams or who are already overworked as it is. So we are seeing more of a request for more creative ways of communicating with travelers. Because again, this is an ongoing situation still with COVID. I know we're talking about it almost like it's almost past, but it's still obviously still affecting the world that we live in today. And so we need to be prepared for those moments, or if those moments change, and we need to make sure we can communicate with our travelers as efficiently as possible. So it's kind of where we're seeing the trends going.
Well, thank you so much, Bradley. I agree with what you said about changing times. And with that, today we would like to welcome one of Gateway affiliates, Kyle Roush, who will be talking a little bit about what Gateway does with duty of care solutions. So, Kyle.
Hi, everyone. Yes, just take a few minutes to present some exciting opportunities we have through Gateway. So Gateway's duty of care solutions is available to help institutions and organizations assess their existing risk management structures and identify and troubleshoot potential duty of care liability issues or oversights. I think with the new risks posed by the global pandemic, we're also available to help institutions and organizations develop responsive new policies and resources that can be nimble enough to adapt to the constantly evolving conditions affecting international travel. Now, we understand that each institution is unique, so we customize our services for each of our partners to accommodate differences in institutional culture, size, and scope. We can also consult on an hourly basis to address a specific need, conduct an external audit of your current systems and protocols, or provide on-demand training and assist with developing new protocols. Additionally, I'm really excited to announce here that we've been developing a new comprehensive and tailored workshop series we're calling Gateway Prepared. Prepared is a 4-part training package designed to support institutions and organizations with fulfilling their duty of care responsibilities regarding international travel on institution-approved or sponsored activity. This package includes an initial institutional risk assessment, followed by 3 interactive training sessions that have been designed for colleges and universities to highlight industry best practices in this space. So we invite you to jump on the Gateway website, explore our duty of care solutions, and please get in touch if you're interested in continuing the dialogue. I'll go ahead and put my email into the chat. Thanks for the time.
Well, that was perfect. Thank you so much, Kyle. And certainly thank you to all of our panelists, Serena, Mike, and Bradley, and of course, Rosa helping to facilitate the Q&A. Kyle's email is in the chat. And we want to just thank you for attending today. We're here wrapping up. If there's a last question you want to put in the chat, we'll try to accommodate it. But at this point, we want to thank you. This is the final webinar in our series for this fall from the Gateway Leadership Institute focused on duty of care. We want to just give you the teaser that in the spring of 2022, probably in late February or March, we will be launching our next cohort with the Gateway Leadership Institute. And our webinar series and the theme of the Institute will be focused on international enrollment management, whether that's recruitment or ROI, all these essential pieces we're going to be focused on, and really excited about that development. So thank you so much, everybody, for attending today. This webinar will be posted on the Gateway Gateway website later this week. So you could watch it again if you'd like to, or share it with your friends. And thank you so much. We look forward to catching up with you next semester. Have a great day, everybody.
Thank you, everyone.